Callan had taken many dangerous jobs in his life, but this one felt different. The message had been clear: protect 2 alien sisters at all costs. The reward was generous, almost too generous. That alone made him suspicious. But Callan wasn't the type to ask too many questions. He arrived at the meeting point, a secluded spaceport on the outskirts of Velkanine, a neutral trade planet. The air smelled of burning fuel and damp metal. Cargo ships came and went, their engines humming in the distance. Callan adjusted the strap of his bag, checking for his weapons out of habit. He had no idea what he was walking into, but he was ready. A tall alien in a hooded cloak stepped forward. His face was mostly hidden, but his voice was deep and urgent. "You are the human they sent?" the alien asked. Callan nodded. "That depends. Who's asking?" The alien sighed and motioned for him to follow. They walked through a narrow alley behind the port, stopping at a secured transport vehicle. The door opened, and inside, Callan saw them. 2 alien girls with silver blue skin and glowing violet eyes. The sisters stared at him cautiously. "These are Ceres and Vela," the hooded alien said. "They are under your protection now." Callan frowned. "And who exactly are they?" The alien hesitated, then spoke in a lower tone. "They are the last heirs of the Tsari royal family. If they die, their entire bloodline ends." Callan's instincts screamed trouble. He had guarded criminals, diplomats, even military leaders, but royal heirs. That was a whole new level of risk. "Who's after them?" he asked. The alien glanced around as if someone might be listening. "Everyone who fears what they could become." Before Callan could ask more, the hooded figure stepped back and vanished into the shadows, leaving him alone with the twins. Cyrus, the older-looking of the 2, was calm and analytical. She studied Callan carefully before speaking. "You are human. We expected someone different." Vela, the younger and more expressive sister, crossed her arms. "He doesn't look that strong." Callan smirked. "And I expected a safer job, but here we are." Cyrus tilted her head. "Can we trust you?" "I don't betray my clients," Callan said simply. "But I need the full truth. If I'm protecting you, I need to know what I'm up against." Cyrus and Vela exchanged a glance. Then Cyrus spoke softly. "We carry something valuable inside us. Not an object, but knowledge. A genetic memory of our ancestors. Many fear what we might awaken." Callan exhaled. "So people want you dead, because of what's in your blood?" Vela nodded. "It's more than that. The moment our enemies find us, they will do whatever it takes to erase us." A low beep interrupted them. Callan checked his scanner. A security breach warning. Someone had tracked them. "We need to leave. Now." Before the sisters could react, the walls around them shook. Explosions erupted outside the spaceport, sending shockwaves through the ground. The attack had begun. Callan grabbed Cyrus and Vela, pulling them towards the transport vehicle. "Hold on tight," he said as he activated the thrusters. As the vehicle lifted off, Callan's mind raced. He had taken dangerous jobs before, but something told him this one would be different. Protecting these sisters wasn't just about survival. It was about changing the fate of an entire civilization. The transport vehicle shot into the sky, engines roaring as Callan gripped the controls. Below them, the spaceport was in chaos. Explosions rocked the landing pads, and armed figures swarmed the area. Whoever was after the twins had come prepared. "Hold on," Callan shouted as he swerved to avoid a missile. The heat from the explosion made the cabin tremble. Cyrus and Vela sat behind him, gripping the safety bars. Vela's eyes widened as she looked through the rear window. "They're following us." Callan checked the scanner. 3 enemy ships had locked onto them. His mind raced. The transport wasn't built for combat, but he wasn't about to let these assassins win. "We need to shake them off," he muttered. He dived the ship toward the lower atmosphere of Velkanine, weaving between towering industrial buildings. The enemy ships followed, firing energy blasts that barely missed them. "This thing doesn't have weapons?" Cyrus asked, gripping her seat tightly. "No, but it has speed," Callan said, pushing the engines to their limit. The ship groaned in protest, but it obeyed. The chase continued through the city. Callan ducked under massive cargo cranes and skimmed the rooftops, forcing the enemy ships to adjust their course. One of them clipped a building and spun out of control, crashing into a factory below. "One down," Callan muttered, but the other two were still on them. Vela leaned forward. "I can disable their scanners for a few seconds." Callan gave her a sharp look. "You can do that." She placed her hands on the control panel and closed her eyes. The air around her seemed to hum. A strange energy spread through the ship's systems. Suddenly, the enemy ships veered off course. Their targeting systems flickered. "Now," Vela gasped. Callan took his chance. He swerved hard, leading the transport into a narrow passage between two skyscrapers. The enemy ships tried to follow, but their sensors were still down. One crashed into a steel beam, exploding on impact. The last ship recovered quickly and fired a plasma blast. The shot hit their right engine, sending sparks flying. "We're losing power," Cyrus warned. Callan cursed. "I can still land us. Hold tight." He aimed for a canyon outside the city, a place he knew would offer cover. As the transport descended, the remaining enemy ship hovered above, scanning for them. "Stay quiet," Callan whispered. The sisters barely breathed as the enemy ship searched. Seconds felt like hours. Then, after a tense moment, the ship flew away. Callan let out a breath of relief. "We need to move fast. They'll be back." He helped the twins out of the transport. They were in a rocky canyon, hidden from the sky. The stars above twinkled, but the danger was far from over. Cyrus dusted off her coat. "You saved us." Callan smirked. "Yeah, well, I like staying alive." Vela gave him a curious look. "You don't ask for much, do you?" He shrugged. "A job's a job." But even as he said it, Callan knew this wasn't just another job. Protecting these sisters had already turned into something much bigger than he expected, and he had a feeling this was only the beginning. The canyon was quiet, except for the distant hum of enemy ships searching for them. The rocky terrain provided cover, but Callan knew they couldn't stay here for long. He checked the damaged transport. "Engines are fried. We're not flying out of here." Cyrus glanced up at the sky. "They'll come back soon." Callan nodded. "We move on foot. There's an old outpost a few miles from here. If we're lucky, we'll find supplies and maybe a way off this planet." Vela groaned. "Walking. Great." Callan ignored her and grabbed his backpack. "Let's go." A long walk through the canyons. The three of them moved carefully, stepping over jagged rocks. The twin moons of Velka 9 cast a soft glow over the landscape. It was a strange kind of beauty. But Callan wasn't here to admire the view. As they walked, he noticed Cyrus and Vela moving in perfect sync. Their steps matched. Even their breathing seemed connected. "You two are different," he finally said. Cyrus gave him a small smile. "Seri twins share a unique bond. Our minds are linked. What one of us feels, the other senses." Callan raised an eyebrow. "You can read each other's thoughts." "Not exactly," Cyrus explained. "But we always know what the other is feeling." Vela smirked. "So don't try lying to us, human." Callan chuckled. "Noted." They continued in silence for a while. Then Callan spoke again. "That hooded guy back at the spaceport said people fear you because of what's inside you. What did he mean?" Cyrus hesitated, but Vela sighed. "It's not something we usually talk about. I need to know. If I'm protecting you, I need the full truth." Cyrus exchanged a glance with her sister, then finally spoke. "Our people, the Tsari, have something called the gene of remembrance. It's a genetic memory passed down through generations." "Meaning?" Callan asked. Vela crossed her arms. It means we carry the knowledge, instincts, and even skills of our ancestors. Callan's eyes widened. That sounds powerful. It is, Cyrus said, but it's also dangerous. If unlocked too soon, it can overwhelm the mind. It's why the ruling families of the Tsari were always carefully trained. If we survive, we could become the strongest rulers our people have seen in centuries. Callan exhaled. And your enemies don't want that to happen. Cyrus nodded. Exactly. An unseen threat. Suddenly, Vela stopped walking. Wait, something's wrong. Callan turned, gripping his weapon. What do you hear? Cyrus closed her eyes. Not hear, sense. Before Callan could ask what she meant, a red laser shot past his shoulder, barely missing him. Ambush, he shouted. Dark figures emerged from the rocks. Their weapons glowed in the night. Callan pulled out his blaster and fired, hitting one attacker in the chest. Cyrus and Vela moved as one, dodging and weaving between the rocks. A soldier rushed at Vela, but before he could grab her, she spun and landed a precise strike to his throat. He collapsed instantly. Callan was impressed. Not bad. Vela grinned. I told you we're not helpless. More enemies appeared. Callan knew they were outnumbered. We need to run. Cyrus pointed to a narrow cave in the rock wall. There. They sprinted toward it, dodging gunfire. Callan covered their retreat, taking out 2 more enemies before diving into the cave. The sisters followed, and darkness swallowed them whole. A new mystery. Inside the cave, the air was damp and cool. The sound of enemy soldiers echoed from outside, but they didn't dare follow. Vela caught her breath. Why did they stop chasing us? Cyrus looked around, her violet eyes scanning the walls. Because they're afraid of what's in here. Callan frowned. And what's in here? Cyrus placed her hand against the cave wall. Symbols began to glow beneath her touch. Ancient writing. Tsari writing. She turned to Callan, her expression serious. This place, it's not just a cave. It's a forgotten temple of our ancestors. Callan sighed. Great. That means more trouble, doesn't it? Vela smirked. You're finally learning, human. Outside, the enemy forces regrouped, waiting. They knew the sisters wouldn't stay hidden forever. The cave was silent except for their breathing. The glowing symbols on the walls cast a soft blue light, illuminating Cyrus's focused expression as she traced the ancient markings. Callan leaned against the wall, keeping his weapon ready. So, what exactly is this place? Cyrus spoke without looking at him. It's a Tsari sanctuary, a place where our ancestors once gathered to meditate and pass on their knowledge. Vela sighed. Not that it's helping us right now. We're still trapped. Callan peeked outside. The enemy forces had set up a perimeter around the cave entrance. They weren't coming in, but they weren't leaving either. They're waiting for us to come out, he muttered. Vela crossed her arms. Why don't they just storm in and finish this? Cyrus glanced at the walls. Because they know what's inside. This place is sacred to the Tsari. If they destroy it, they risk losing the very thing they might be after. Callan's eyes narrowed. Which is? Cyrus hesitated. Knowledge. Before Callan could ask more, a deep humming sound echoed through the cave. The symbols on the walls flickered, and a hidden passage opened behind them. Callan frowned. That's convenient. Cyrus took a step forward. Not convenient, intended. The sanctuary recognizes us. Vela smirked. Finally, something goes our way. Callan wasn't so sure. Or it's a trap. A fateful decision. They stepped through the passage cautiously. The air grew colder, and the tunnel led them deeper underground. Strange carvings lined the walls, depicting scenes of Tsari warriors and glowing figures. Callan glanced at Cyrus. You understand any of this? She nodded slowly. It's an old prophecy. It speaks of a guardian who will stand beside the last heirs of the Tsari and protect them from the darkness. Vela raised an eyebrow. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Callan scoffed. I don't believe in fate. Cirrus smiled faintly. Then why did you take this job? Before he could answer, a loud explosion shook the cave. The enemy had grown impatient. They were coming in. The betrayal. Callan turned sharply, gripping his blaster. We need to move. Now. But before they could take another step, a shadow moved behind them. A figure stepped forward, blocking their path. It was the hooded man who had first given Callan this job. Vela's eyes widened. You? The hooded man lowered his hood, revealing his face. But sorry, just like the sisters. Sarah stiffened. You were supposed to protect us. The man's voice was calm. I am protecting our people. You too are dangerous. Your power could bring war, not peace. Callan's grip tightened on his weapon. So you sold them out. The man sighed. You don't understand, human. The universe isn't as simple as you think. Some sacrifices must be made. Callan didn't hesitate. Yeah, well, I don't like sacrifices. He fired. The hooded man dodged, but the shot grazed his arm. He cursed and raised his own weapon. The cave filled with blaster fire as Callan fought him off. Cyrus and Vela pressed their hands to the glowing symbols on the walls. The sanctuary responded. A hidden door slid open behind them. Callan, this way. Cyrus shouted. Callan knocked the hooded man back with a powerful kick, then dashed toward the opening. As they ran through the passage, the cave behind them collapsed, sealing them off from their pursuers. A narrow escape. The passage led them to the surface, an abandoned landing pad covered in dust and debris. A single old transport ship sat there. Vela ran to the controls. It still has power. Callan helped Cirrus inside, then turned back. In the distance, the enemy forces were closing in. We don't have time to warm up the engines. We need to go, now. Vela punched the controls. The ship roared to life, lifting off the ground just as the first shots were fired. They barely made it into the sky before the enemy ships chased them. Callan took a deep breath. Well, that was fun. Cirrus looked at him, her expression unreadable. You could have left us back there. Why didn't you? He smirked. Because I don't like being predictable. Vela laughed. Looks like we're stuck with you now, human. Callan just shook his head. This mission had turned into something much bigger than he had ever expected. And it was far from over. The stolen transport ship shot through the sky, its engines groaning under the strain. Callan gripped the controls, weaving through the planet's upper atmosphere as enemy ships gave chase. The alarm system blared, flashing red warnings across the cockpit. Vela, tell me you have something to shake them off. Callan shouted over the noise. Vela, sitting at the co-pilot's seat, rapidly typed into the ship's outdated control panel. I'm trying. This ship is ancient. It's barely holding together. Cyrus, sitting behind them, closed her eyes. Turn left. Now. Callan didn't hesitate. He jerked the controls, making a sharp turn just as an enemy missile streaked past them. It exploded harmlessly in empty space. Callan gave Cyrus a quick look. How did you know that was coming? She opened her eyes, a hint of exhaustion on her face. I felt it. Vela rolled her eyes. I hate when she does that. Callan focused back on flying. All right, hold tight. I have an idea. He steered them toward an asteroid belt on the edge of the system. The enemy ships hesitated at the sight of the massive floating rocks. Callan pushed the ship forward, dodging and weaving through the chaotic debris. One of the enemy ships wasn't so lucky. It clipped an asteroid and spiraled out of control, crashing into another rock. That's one less to worry about, Callan muttered. The last enemy ship hesitated, unwilling to risk the dangerous field. Moments later, it turned and retreated. Vela cheered. We made it. Callan let out a breath and leaned back. For now. Cirrus was still watching him carefully. You knew exactly where to go. Callan smirked. Let's just say this isn't my first time escaping through an asteroid field. Vela laughed. What kind of life have you lived, human? Callan just shrugged. A place to rest. After making sure they weren't being followed, Callan set course for a nearby abandoned space station orbiting a dead moon. The station was old and falling apart, but its power core still functioned. They landed in a dark hangar. The station's lights flickered weakly as they stepped inside. Vela wrinkled her nose. It smells like something died here. Callan checked his blaster, probably because something did. Cyrus ignored them, scanning the station's systems. This place was once a research facility. There are still functioning medical supplies here. Callan sighed in relief. Good. Let's get some rest. They found an old crew quarters with enough space for all three of them. The beds were stiff, the air was stale, but it was better than nothing. Callan sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his temples. All right, let's talk. We need a real plan. Cyrus sat across from him. We need to find out who is truly behind this. The people chasing us aren't just bounty hunters. They're organized. Vela stretched out on her bed. Maybe someone high up doesn't want us alive. Callan nodded. That hooded traitor back at the cave said something interesting. He believes you two are dangerous. Cyrus sighed. Because of our genetic memory. Callan leaned forward. What exactly happens if you unlock it? She hesitated. We don't fully know. No Tseri has done it in centuries. The knowledge of thousands of years would flood our minds. It could make us powerful, or it could destroy us. Vela frowned. Not very reassuring. Callan sighed. All right. So we have people trying to kill you because they don't want to risk you becoming something powerful. Cyrus nodded. Yes. Callan rubbed his face. And do either of you want to unlock it? The sisters exchanged a glance. We don't know, Cyrus admitted. Callan exhaled. Great. That makes my job easy. A moment of trust. The station's power flickered again, plunging them into brief darkness before dim emergency lights activated. Vela yawned. Well, I'm too tired to worry about ancient genetics. I'm sleeping. She stretched out on her bed and pulled a thin blanket over herself. Cyrus, however, was still watching Callan. You don't trust easily, do you? She asked. Callan shook his head. No, but I trust my instincts. She smiled faintly. And what do your instincts say about us? Callan looked at her, then at Vela, already half asleep. He thought about everything that had happened. Their strength, their intelligence, their ability to survive. Finally, he answered, I think you're both full of trouble, but I don't think you deserve to die for it. Cyrus gave him a small nod. Then you're the first person in a long time to say that. Callan stretched out on his own bed, staring at the ceiling. He had taken this job for money, but now things were different. Now he wasn't just protecting the sisters. Now he wanted to see what they could become. The station's dim lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. Callan sat awake, his back against the cold metal wall, his blaster resting on his lap. He was tired, but sleep wasn't an option. His instincts told him something was coming. Cyrus and Vela lay on their beds, resting but not truly sleeping. The tension in the air was thick. They all knew the enemy wasn't far behind. Cyrus finally broke the silence. They will find us soon. Callan sighed. I know. Vela rubbed her eyes. Then why are we still here? Callan glanced at the broken security monitors. Because we need to make a stand. If we keep running, they'll just chase us forever. Cyrus nodded. You want to fight. Callan gave a small smirk. I don't like running. Vela stretched her arms. All right, then let's make it count. Preparing for battle. The three of them moved quickly, gathering whatever weapons and supplies they could find in the station. Old crates filled with outdated blasters, energy shields, and explosives lined the storage bay. Callan inspected an old rifle and nodded. This will do. Cyrus studied the station's layout. We can use the narrow hallways to our advantage. They won't be able to surround us easily. Vela grinned as she powered up a handheld energy shield. I like it. Let's make them regret chasing us. Callan looked at them both. You two sure you're ready for this? Cirrus met his gaze. We have no choice. Vela smirked. Besides, I trust you, human. For the first time, Callan realized they weren't just his mission anymore. They were his team. The enemy arrives. An alarm blared. Callan checked the monitors. They're here. A fleet of enemy ships surrounded the station. Red lights flashed as docking clamps engage. Armed soldiers in dark armor stormed into the corridors. Callan gripped his blaster. Showtime. The first wave of enemies entered through the main hallway. Callan took cover behind a crate and fired, dropping 3 soldiers before they could react. Cirrus used her telepathic senses to predict enemy movements, guiding Callan's shots. Left side, 2 coming. He turned and fired, hitting both targets before they could shoot. Vela activated her energy shield and charged forward, deflecting enemy blasts before taking them down with precise strikes. I could do this all day, she shouted. The battle was fierce. More soldiers flooded in, but the narrow halls worked against them. Callan and the sisters fought like they had trained for this moment all their lives. Then, a deep voice echoed through the station. Cyrus, Vela, surrender now, and your deaths will be painless. It was the hooded traitor, that sorry man who had betrayed them. Cyrus clenched her fists. We don't surrender. Callan smirked. Good answer. The turning point. The hooded man stepped into view, flanked by heavily armored guards. His eyes locked onto Callan. You again. You should have left them to their fate. Callan tilted his head. Yeah, well, I've grown attached. The traitor sighed. Then you'll die with them. He raised his hand and unleashed a powerful wave of energy. Callan barely had time to react. The force slammed into him, sending him crashing into a wall. His vision blurred. Vela shouted, Callan. Cyrus's eyes burned with determination. She stepped forward, facing the traitor. Enough. The air around her shifted. The cave's prophecy flashed in her mind. The moment she had been avoiding had come. She closed her eyes and embraced the power of her ancestors. The awakening. A golden glow surrounded Cyrus. Ancient symbols appeared on her skin. The traitor's eyes widened. Impossible. Cyrus raised her hand. Not impossible. Destiny. With a single motion, she sent a shockwave through the station, knocking back the enemy forces. Vela grinned. That's my sister. The traitor struggled to stand. You don't understand what you're doing. Cyrus stepped forward. I understand perfectly. She lifted her hand, and the traitor's weapon shattered in his grip. His eyes filled with fear. Callan groaned as he stood up. Well, that's new. Cyrus turned to him, her glow fading slightly. We need to finish this. Callan smirked. Let's do it together. The final blow. The last of the enemy soldiers fell. The station was quiet again. The hooded traitor knelt on the ground, defeated. Cyrus looked at him. Your war is over. Vela punched his shoulder. And next time, don't underestimate a human. Callan laughed. Let's get out of here. They boarded their ship, leaving the wrecked station behind. As they flew into the stars, Callan glanced at Cyrus. So, how do you feel? She smiled. Like I finally know who I am. Vela leaned back in her seat. I think we just changed the galaxy. Callan grinned. Yeah, and something tells me our adventure is just beginning. The stolen ship glided through space, leaving the ruined station behind. Callan sat in the pilot's seat, watching the endless stars stretch before them. The battle was over, but something told him that life would never be the same again. Cyrus stood beside him, her expression unreadable. The golden markings that had appeared during the fight were still faintly glowing on her skin. She had unlocked something ancient, something powerful. Vela stretched her arms as she lounged in the co-pilot's seat. So what now? Do we just fly off into the unknown? Callan smirked. That was my original plan. But I have a feeling you two have bigger ideas. Cyrus nodded. We can't keep running forever. We need to decide our future. Vela grinned, and I say we take back what's ours. Callan raised an eyebrow. You mean the Tsari throne? Cyrus glanced at her sister. We were never meant to rule. But after what happened, we can't ignore the responsibility. Vela sighed. Yeah, destiny and all that. Callan chuckled. You don't sound too excited about it. Vela smirked. I just don't like politics. Cyrus smiled softly. Neither do I. But we have a chance to rebuild our people, to stop the cycle of war and betrayal. Callan nodded. And you think that Tsari will accept you as their rulers? Cyrus's gaze was steady. Not right away. But they will see that we are different. A quiet moment. For the first time in days, silence settled over them. No running. No gunfire. No explosions. Callan leaned back in his chair. You know, I didn't plan on sticking around this long. Vela laughed. And yet here you are. Cyrus tilted her head. Will you stay? Callan hesitated. He had spent his life moving from one job to the next. He never had a reason to stay anywhere. But something about Cyrus and Vela felt different. I don't do loyalty, he said finally. But I might make an exception. Vela grinned. Admitted, you'd be lost without us. Callan smirked. More like you'd be lost without me. Cyrus chuckled. Then I suppose we are all exactly where we need to be. A new mission. The ship's console beeped. A transmission came through. An encrypted message. Cyrus tapped the screen, decoding it. Her expression darkened. It's from a Tsari loyalist. Callan frowned. What does it say? Cyrus's voice was quiet. The enemy isn't finished. They are gathering forces. If we don't act, they will come after us again. Vela groaned. So much for resting. Callan sighed. Looks like our fight isn't over yet. Cyrus looked at him. Will you fight with us? Callan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the stars. Once, he had been just another mercenary, just another man trying to survive. But now, he had something worth fighting for. He turned back to Cyrus and Vela and smiled. Yeah, I'm with you. Vela pumped her fist. Then let's go make some history. Cyrus nodded. Together, Callan gripped the controls, set their course, and launched the ship forward. The stars stretched out before them, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just running. He was going home. The end.